History does not lie, but it does leave things out. It keeps the victories and erases the doubts. It records the speeches, but forgets the silence afterward. It turns people into symbols, because symbols are easier to remember than human beings. The men and women we call legends were not legends when they lived. They were uncertain. They hesitated. They feared failure and misunderstood the consequences of their actions. They made decisions without knowing how history would judge them. This story is not about destroying greatness. It is about understanding it. Because when we see legendary figures as they truly were, flawed, conflicted human, their achievements become more meaningful, not less. This is history without polish. This is legacy without illusion. Great figures are often remembered at their peak. Crowns on their heads, power in their hands, authority in their voices. What history rarely shows is where they began. Julius Caesar is remembered as Rome's greatest general and a man whose ambition destroyed a republic. But ambition was not his starting point. Fear was. Caesar was born into a respected but politically weakened family. His name carried history but not power. In Rome, that distinction mattered. From a young age, Caesar watched rivals rise while he struggled for relevance. He learned early that talent alone meant nothing without visibility. Debt became his weapon. He borrowed recklessly, not for luxury but for influence. Public games, political favors, and alliances were purchased with money he did not have. Caesar understood something fundamental about power. People follow presence before principle. His military brilliance came later. First came survival. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon River, history remembers defiance. But the decision was born of desperation. Returning to Rome without an army meant humiliation, trial, and exile. Civil war was the risk. Oblivion was the alternative. Caesar chose to be remembered. Cleopatra VII is remembered as a seductress who manipulated powerful men. This version of her story was written by her enemies. In reality, Cleopatra was a scholar raised in a court where survival depended on intelligence. She was fluent in multiple languages and educated in science, politics, and philosophy. Unlike previous rulers of Egypt, Cleopatra spoke directly to her people in their own language. She ruled not as a symbol, but as an administrator. Her alliances with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony were not romantic accidents. They were strategic decisions made under pressure from Rome's expanding power. Cleopatra understood that Egypt's independence was already fragile. She sought partnership, not domination. When defeat became inevitable, Cleopatra chose death over humiliation. Her final act was control in a world determined to strip it from her. History remembered her beauty. It forgot her intellect. Alexander the Great conquered the known world before the age of 30. He is remembered as fearless, decisive, unstoppable. He was also a child shaped by expectation. Alexander's father, King Philip II, was a brilliant military leader and a violent man. From childhood, Alexander was told he was destined for greatness. Failure was never an option. Normality was never allowed. As Alexander's empire expanded, his isolation deepened. Friends became subjects. Advisors became silent. He drank heavily. He trusted less. He punished more harshly. Alexander did not conquer because he loved war. He conquered because stopping meant facing emptiness. He died young, far from home, surrounded by an empire too large to hold together. History calls him great. Few ask whether he ever felt free. Joan of Arc is remembered as a divinely inspired warrior who saved France. She was also a teenage girl, raised amid constant war. Her childhood was shaped by invasion, burned villages, and displaced families. Violence was normal. Death was expected. Joan's visions gave her certainty in a world without safety. Belief became armor. She did not lead armies through strategy. She led them through conviction. When she was captured, her usefulness ended. The trial was designed to destroy her credibility, not discover truth. Joan died frightened, confused, and abandoned by those she served. History canonized her. It did not record her terror. Leonardo da Vinci is remembered as the ultimate genius. Painter, inventor, anatomist, engineer. What is less remembered is his inability to finish. Leonardo's mind moved faster than his world. Every discovery led to another question. Completion felt like limitation. Patrons grew frustrated. Deadlines meant little to him. Leonardo doubted himself constantly. He revised endlessly. He feared settling for less than truth. The Mona Lisa followed him for years, unfinished in his own eyes. History calls him brilliant. Leonardo feared he had not done enough. Genghis Khan is remembered as a destroyer, a man whose armies erased cities. He was also a lawmaker shaped by betrayal. Born into poverty, he watched his father murdered and his family abandoned. Survival taught him loyalty mattered more than blood. He built an empire on merit, not lineage. Religious freedom was protected. Trade routes were secured. Fear was his method because chaos was his enemy. History remembers the violence. It forgets the stability that followed. Legends are remembered at their height. But greatness is formed long before power. Fear, insecurity, trauma, and doubt are the foundations history rarely shows. And yet, without them, none of these figures would have existed. Greatness changes the way people are seen. It also changes the way they are treated. As influence grows, honesty disappears. Praise replaces truth. And isolation becomes permanent. The figures in this section were not undone by weakness alone. They were shaped and strained by the weight of responsibility. Abraham Lincoln is remembered as calm, moral, and unshakable. A steady presence during America's darkest hours. In private, Lincoln lived with constant sorrow. Before reaching the presidency, he had already buried 2 sons. Death followed him long before war did. Lincoln suffered from deep depression, known at the time as melancholy. Friends monitored him closely, fearing self-harm. As president, he carried the Civil War personally. Casualty lists were not numbers. They were lives he believed he had failed. Lincoln visited hospitals quietly, without press. He spoke little but listened closely. The Emancipation Proclamation was not a triumphant declaration. It was a moral gamble. He knew it would intensify the war. He signed it anyway. When Lincoln was assassinated, the nation mourned a hero. Few understood how exhausted he had been. Napoleon Bonaparte rose from obscurity to rule Europe. History remembers confidence and command. Napoleon remembered rejection. Born in Corsica, he spoke French with an accent that marked him as inferior. At military school, he was mocked and isolated. Napoleon compensated through discipline and obsession. He studied endlessly. He memorized terrain, supply lines, and human behavior. Power validated him, but it never cured his insecurity. He centralized authority because he trusted no one fully. He demanded loyalty because he feared betrayal. When Napoleon crowned himself emperor, it was not arrogance alone. It was proof to himself that he belonged. Exile broke him not because he lost power, but because he lost relevance. Marie Curie transformed science. Her discoveries reshaped medicine, physics, and understanding of matter. But knowledge came without protection. Radiation was invisible. Its dangers were unknown. Curie handled radioactive materials without shielding. She carried samples in her pockets. She worked beside glowing substances daily. Her body paid the price. Chronic pain, fatigue, and failing vision followed her for years. Her hands burned. Her bones weakened. Despite international recognition, she faced relentless discrimination. She was denied positions. Her character was publicly attacked. Curie continued working until her health failed. She did not die from ambition. She died from dedication. Socrates left no written work. His legacy exists entirely through others. He walked Athens asking simple questions that exposed uncomfortable truths. What is justice? What is virtue? What do you truly know? Socrates believed certainty was dangerous. Those convinced of their own wisdom rarely examined their actions. His questions embarrassed powerful men, not through insult but through clarity. After years of war and instability, Athens wanted order. Socrates represented doubt. His trial was legal. Its outcome was predetermined. When given the chance to flee, he refused. To escape would betray his principles. He drank poison calmly, continuing discussion until speech failed. History calls him a martyr. He believed he was fulfilling his duty. Vlad III is remembered as a monster, a ruler defined by cruelty and terror. His brutality was not random. As a child, Vlad was held hostage by the Ottoman Empire. He witnessed torture and execution firsthand. Survival demanded emotional detachment. When he returned to rule Wallachia, betrayal surrounded him. Nobles conspired. Foreign powers threatened invasion. Fear became his defense. Impaling enemies was a message, not madness. Crime decreased. Order was enforced. To outsiders, Vlad was a tyrant. To many of his people, he was protection. History chose the horror. It ignored the context. Power isolates. As influence grows, fewer people speak honestly. Decisions become heavier. Mistakes become permanent. Many legendary figures were surrounded by people, yet profoundly alone. History simplifies because complexity is uncomfortable. Heroes must be pure. Villains must be absolute. Contradictions are erased to preserve narrative clarity. But clarity is not truth. History preserves outcomes. It rarely preserves the internal cost of achieving them. By the time individuals become legends, their private lives have already disappeared from the record. What remains are symbols, simplified for memory. This final section returns humanity to those symbols. Mahatma Gandhi is remembered as the embodiment of nonviolence and moral certainty. A man who led millions through restraint and patience. In reality, Gandhi lived in constant internal struggle. He doubted his own impulses. He feared desire, anger, and attachment would corrupt his message. To control himself, Gandhi imposed strict discipline on his body. Fasting, celibacy, and extreme simplicity were not performances. They were personal restraints. Even among his followers, his methods caused discomfort. Some saw inspiration. Others saw obsession. Gandhi worried endlessly that his philosophy would be misunderstood, that nonviolence would be used as passivity rather than resistance. When India achieved independence, violence followed. Partition brought bloodshed and displacement. The victory the world celebrated left Gandhi devastated. He died believing he had failed to prevent hatred. Winston Churchill is remembered as the voice that refused surrender. a leader whose words held a nation together. But Churchill's life was filled with error and rejection. Before World War II, he supported military campaigns that ended in disaster. He opposed social reforms that later proved necessary. These failures haunted him. Churchill suffered from severe depression, which he called the Black Dog. Periods of energy were followed by deep despair. During the war, his confidence was as much performance as belief. Privately, he feared collapse. He worked constantly to outrun doubt. He drank heavily to silence it. After victory, the public voted him out of office. Churchill accepted the result calmly, but it confirmed his deepest fear. That usefulness, not loyalty, defines memory. Nikola Tesla imagined the future before it arrived. Alternating current, wireless communication, remote control. He was brilliant, but ill-equipped for competition. Tesla distrusted businessmen and refused to compromise his ideas. Others profited from his work, while he retreated into isolation. As years passed, Tesla developed rigid routines and obsessions. He avoided touch. He counted steps. He spoke of communicating with animals. The world dismissed him as eccentric. In truth, Tesla was exhausted and disappointed. When he died alone in a hotel room, his ideas were unfinished and his reputation nearly erased. History reclaimed him decades later. Too late for gratitude to matter. Elizabeth I ruled England for nearly half a century. Her reign became known as a golden age. She never married. Marriage would have compromised her authority. Love would have exposed weakness. Elizabeth chose power over companionship. As years passed, trusted advisors died. Court politics hardened. The queen who once commanded loyalty grew increasingly isolated. In her final days, Elizabeth refused to lie down. She stood silent, unwilling to submit even to death. England celebrated her reign. She died alone. Despite differences in time, culture, and belief, these figures share common truths. They were isolated. They doubted themselves. They paid personal prices history did not record. Greatness required sacrifice, but it did not offer comfort. When we reduce historical figures to heroes or villains, we lose understanding. Complexity does not weaken legacy. It strengthens it. Flawed individuals achieving lasting impact reveal what is possible, not perfection but persistence. The figures in this story were not above humanity. They were bound by it. They made decisions without knowing outcomes. They acted with limited knowledge, under immense pressure. When myths are removed, greatness does not disappear. It becomes more meaningful. History is not a gallery of flawless icons. It is a record of human beings trying to shape uncertain worlds. And perhaps that is the most important lesson history can offer.